a friend came back from San Diego. We worked there. He says, "Hey, you guys, I found this thing. You're going to love it." And of course, he was right. We did love it. But like a week into playing fantasy football, I said, we don't have all the information we need to play this right. Well. What have we here? How are you, JJ?
I'm good, man. How are you? Have you gotten in the Peloton ride today?
I have not yet. So panic meter's about halfway. It's like Rain Man, it's 4 p.m. Wapner's coming on.
Yeah.
Peloton and wait. So yes, I'll get there though.
Good. Okay. I just so folks know, but you and I are Peloton buddies. Like that if you were to describe our relationship in one way, it would be probably first that we bonded over the Peloton.
You are like a mentor. You are like I see you changed the whole way I approached things. Like, I kind of got into this late. It's late for me, so I'm getting into everything late. But, started a few years ago and saw you were on there and we started chatting and you had some really great insights and some approaches, and I've taken them to heart and made great gains. So I would say you're the coach, the mentor.
Well, but it's funny because it's been the opposite throughout my fantasy football journey and career with you, where early on things, because you're kind of an OG in the space. This isn't an age thing. This is simply because I know that you'll yell at me for saying something like that. But
no, I would never yell.
You're an OG in the space. You've been around for a while, right? How long have you been officially like doing this full time as your job?
This is my 31st year.
Yeah. Right. Which is crazy because many people listening to this aren't even 30 years old. Right. And so, but no, for real, like whenever I started, this was back in like 2011, 2012 or so. You were one of the first people to welcome me with open arms, and I did, some work with the magazines, and just from there, we were able to connect a little bit and chat and whatnot. And then it's been great. The Peloton stuff is always great because it's just nice to have that thing that we can motivate each other with and talk to each other about and such.
And like someone who's, you're wild at it. And so it's like, it's great to understand how I can make gains and some of the approaches I was taking. Like I just got on and started pedaling. Right. But there's some specific approaches and types of rides that I've now adhered to that I think have been really helpful for me and satisfy my itch. I've been a workout weirdo for a long time. If people don't know, I got very heavy there. And like when I turned 45, I decided to do something about it. Now there's like 200 pounds less of me.
Yeah.
So,
amazing.
It's been a long journey, but I wanted to keep the journey going. And for a while I was able to do really intense, I love the beach body stuff, the insanity and all that stuff. But as you head up towards 60 and then get into your 60s, you start realizing, dang, man, I need to make some adjustments. And the Peloton's been like the best adjustment I've made.
Oh yeah. I as you know, this summer I haven't been as good because I'm just doing other things, doing like the strength training with the Peloton app and then doing more running and stuff like that. And then I hop back on, maybe like a month ago or so. I'm trying to get in somewhat of a cadence. The first person I messaged whenever I was kind of down after, not really hitting the numbers that I would hit even 6 months ago was you. Cause you're my go-to with the Peloton stuff. And I'm very grateful for that.
Same. Likewise.
Yeah. So like I said, you're an OG in this space, Bob. Everyone knows you and everyone also who knows you loves you, for obvious reasons. I always say that you're, one of the, if not the nicest human beings that not only will you just ever meet, but definitely within the fantasy football space. But my question to you to start this off is, what's something that you've seen sort of change, both in terms of how people play fantasy football and how that's evolved through the years, but also how analysis is being done within the space?
I think the game itself, the evolution has been remarkable because I've kind of seen the whole thing. Started playing in '86, and like the first week, like a friend came back from San Diego. We worked there. He says, "Hey, you guys, I found this thing. You're gonna love it." And of course, he was right. We did love it. But like a week into playing fantasy football, I said, we don't have all the information we need to play this right. And that was 1986. And so, it took me until 93 to get into it. But there was a brief spell in the early 90s to mid 90s where we had a shift from, people out chasing the USA Today to track their scores or calling my 900 number, which I figured out like, hey, people want the scores quick. Let's do this Sunday night. But the rise of the commissioner software made a huge shift and opened the door. Like, it's hard to find 12 people that that can all have the same timing and do things. And it's just so much easier to do it online. So I think the commissioning software was the huge shift, and maybe started around 96 and became more prominent after that. And at about the same time, the NFL went from like shunning fantasy to realizing it might be a good idea to blow their promotional wins into the sale.
Yep.
And they did, and that made a huge difference as well. So the growth became fairly exponential, and the number of people playing drove the analysis. And the biggest change in the analysis is, like, working for Joe Bryant now, he says something that rings true to me. Like, he says, I couldn't even get a job at my own site now, right? I feel like we've been grandfathered in because there's so many smart people. I go, like, you, Mike Clay, Jeff Ratcliffe, I want to think Curtis Packard. I'm going to leave names off, so I hate reading them. Scott Barrett, Dwayne McFarland, Nathan Yonke, all these people that came out and, just like brought a different form of analysis than we were used to and put an edge to it. Like, and I don't pretend to be that. Like, I'm not out here grinding data. I'm out here assembling it all. I'm collecting it all, assimilating it all, putting it together and running it against my experience and the way I play the game, but providing it to my audience has kind of been the goal, whether it's through the website platforms I have now, Football Guys, or like, what is it now, 13 years on SiriusXM radio. You're trying to give people the whole thing. If you go to my X profile, you'll see I have my tagline there is the person who knows one side of the story knows neither. Right. And I want to assemble the arguments, and I have all kinds of surefire theories and ideas that aren't necessarily surefire. They're ideas, but I want to show my readers both sides of the coin, or give them the full picture to help them make their own decision. Because what I'm trying to do is, what I've learned over the time, JJ, is everyone in my audience thinks they're every bit as smart as me, and they know everything that I know, and they could be just as successful doing what I'm doing if it weren't for some quirk of fate that forces them to work at something else, right?
Yeah.
And there are other people. I mean, there's a handful of people who are out there who want to be handheld, but for the most part, people want to either confirm or verify that they're not insane, or just want to bounce things off you, or find out that the information that they think is true is true. And so I think collecting that up and providing it is great, but the ability to find that information from some really smart people has grown, and that's been the biggest change for me, is the number of super smart people who have gotten to the analysis business.
Do you think that that's why, and this might be like even like a deep, like, personality related question, because like I said, like, you're someone who is incredibly inviting, easy to talk to. You and I have had so many conversations throughout, our relationship and such. But just such an easygoing human being and such a kind human being. But then on top of that, and I'm not trying to take that away at all, right? But on top of that, you've also really, really embraced newcomers in the space,
for sure.
New talent in the space, and bringing them on. Like I said, you brought me on to do work with the magazines through the years and such, and that sort of thing. You've always been very open-minded about that. Whereas a lot of people who are in the position that you're in, who are an OG in any industry, this isn't even necessarily a fantasy football thing, but any industry, might reject new ideas and new people because they don't want to feel threatened in some way. So obviously personality is going to drive that to some degree. There's no doubt. But also, do you think the fact that you're compiling things the way that you are and you're sifting through the information the way that you are, that's another reason as to why you embrace it the way that you do?
That is definitely a reason I embrace it. Look, I started out as arrogance. I wanted to show everyone what other people are doing because I thought I did it way better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But over the time, that also evolved because I realized, like, oh, wow, there are people doing it better. And maybe I better figure this out. And how do you figure that out? Well, you use that information. And like I said, I have opinions. I will go out and I will find data or takes from you or whoever else that backs my position. I'll find takes that go against mine.
Yeah.
And I'll provide both those to say, well, maybe. And I guess that's, like the whole goal for me is giving, what can you do as a fantasy manager? You're not calling plays. You're not throwing passes. You're not throwing blocks, wrapping ankles. Your whole ability to control the outcome of your team's games is being the best informed manager in your league and having that slight edge. And that's what I'm trying to provide. And so as much of that information as I can give them, the happier my audience is and the better I feel about what I'm doing.
I think it really speaks to the thing that I always talk about with my analytical analysis is just thinking in terms of range of outcomes. You're just thinking about range of outcomes in a different way, right? Like you're thinking about it in terms of the the types of content that you're consuming and the nuggets that you're consuming, as opposed to like, looking at a projection and not just being so fixated on that one number, and thinking at least in like a wide range.
You say the range possible outcomes. I left Matt Harmon off my list there.
Oh, yeah.
So like what? So one of the joys, one of the things I'll look back on when I'm done with this is all the people that I was able to be involved with because I saw that they could do something and I gave them a platform and help them raise their own profile a little bit. I mean, it's super satisfying, right? Like you can just out there. I mean, I don't know if there's anybody who hasn't. Well, there are people who haven't, but so many people have written articles for me over the course of the 30 years. And I've been able to publish those and get them out there. Joe Bryant, who I now work for, I published his first article on value-based drafting magazine in 1996, right?
That's crazy.
I mean, so all those things, yes. And I do think that's part of it, though, is making sure you provide. I always felt like, if my goal is informing my audience as best I can, then I should tap into the best minds possible or share the best information from those minds that I possibly can. And that's been something we've also done on series. I mean, I'm dragging people on all the time who probably have much better things to do than come on my show. But you want to get that information out there and expose people to great work. And I think that's going to be, when all is said and done, that'll be the thing I look back on. And, I was a co-founder, one of the founding members of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to get help raise the profiles of people who are creating all the content.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're a part of so many people's stories, and it's fantastic. And honestly, I feel honored that you are a part of my story the way that you have been. So thank you for that.
Well, so I'm a huge fan though. Also, I mean, aside from all the stuff, I'm a huge consumer, and I tend to gravitate towards certain creators because I either like the style, I like the information I'm getting. The information proves to make me look super smart because I'm passing it along, and all those things, right? And so you are very high on that list as well.
Thank you. All right, let's talk some fantasy football. Let's get into some takes because look, you're the week 2 guest. I guess it's a week 2 entering week 2 guest. And when week 1 happens, I mean, you've seen it now for a while where people like to they like to react, but I'd say they overreact. I think that you should be reacting. You just need to understand that balance of reacting versus overreacting, right? And so there's a lot of stuff going on right now across the league where we saw things happen week 1. We see this every year where stuff happens and then things sort of balance out entering week 2 and then week 3.
Or not. Or week 5.
Yeah, right.
I saw something today, JD, that I thought was great. Kevin Patrick at NFL.com wrote, treat week 1 like a lying toddler. Smile, gently correct if necessary. There's no ill will. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's kind of what it is. We sit here and we smartly tell everyone, start your studs, start the guys who drafted me. Well, if we're being honest with everybody, we don't know who the studs are. The studs have yet to identify themselves. We're playing last year's studs. Yeah. And Marcus Grant loves my stupid saying of don't draft last year's best team. Well, that's probably a wise choice, but also you're drafting a lot of last year's best players because they were last year's best players or they've been the best players over time. Right. So I think, leaning into that realization that week 1, 2, 3, starts trailing off, the volatility is going to be huge. Maybe allows you some leeway to make some decisions, but it depends on your style of play. My style of play is I spent all offseason telling myself happy stories about players so I would draft them or telling myself horrible stories about players I didn't want to pick. And pricing them out of my window. So I want to stick with that, but I understand that I've created these narratives myself, right? Based on information I've gleaned and put together over the course of an entire offseason. If I'm being smart, I have to realize that escaping my narratives, saying this is wrong, the faster I can do that, the better off I'm going to be. Yeah. But there's a fine line, right? There's a fine line between totally bailing on the narrative you've built or saying it's going to take a little time. Yeah. And perhaps no player in situation where this applies to more than the tight end situation in Baltimore, right? You get Mark Andrews, who was a 4th, 5th round pick in a lot of 12-team leagues this year. And then out of seemingly nowhere, I mean, look, we all knew Isaiah Likely was on that depth chart, that they might run more, or they probably would run more 12 personnel. A lot of that stuff we knew existed. But I don't think anyone was ready to see what we saw in week 1, right? Like that was not 5 points. That was not an actual prediction or projection by anyone. So my question to you is, how in the world are you handling the situation right now? Do you think that Isaiah Likely is the better fantasy asset straight up moving forward compared to Mark Andrews? I do not. So I think Mark Andrews, we haven't seen the Mark Andrews that I'm about to talk about since before the injury last year.
Right.
But that Mark Andrews was pretty much the best player on the field, the best receiving asset on the field for most every game he was in. And certainly the Ravens' best receiving asset. And it's reasonable to believe that the time off late last year, followed by a car accident or, this summer that kept him off the practice field. Look, when are we going to come to grips with the fact like we can't take lock, right?
Yeah.
Like Christian McCaffrey is a perfect example, but it dovetails with Cooper Kupp last year, where here's somebody who missed an entire month, and we kept telling ourselves, nah, he's so good it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it might matter.
Yeah.
Maybe it mattered a little bit for Mark Andrews, but also what mattered was the Chiefs seemed to realize that Mark Andrews is very good.
Mm-hmm.
We can go back 5 games. He averaged about 20 some yards per game, 0 touchdowns. And we saw it in this game where they were bracketing him, and he was plenty busy, ran plenty of routes. Just seemed like Isaiah Likely was getting better treatment and seemed to make the most of his opportunities. You mentioned the 12 personnel package. I thought like last year we'd see more of it because Todd Monken comes in, and you go back to his time at Georgia, it was like 59% of the time, like the 3rd highest rate in college football. He had a lot of talent position. He has a lot of talent position in Baltimore, so you expected more of it. It was plus it was 50+% in the first game.
Yeah.
That went up. That was up from like 10-11% last year.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see some normalization. But like if they stuck with this, it would make perfect sense to leverage the talent they have on hand. I just don't think the outcomes are going to be the same. We saw Isaiah Likely last year in the 5 games without Andrews. He scored a lot of touchdowns. Scored a touchdown, I think, every game, and still had a hard time hitting that 20-point mark. I don't think he hit it at all last year. And so this seems like a bit of an outlier to me. And I know I was answering questions on my Sirius show last night, Isaiah Likely or the field, basically. And my answer is mostly the field. And I'm wide open to the fact I wrote one of my fantasy notebook columns. I rank maybe about 6 or 7 players a week in that column. 2 weeks ago, I chose to use some of that space on Isaiah Likely because I did think if something were happening to Mark Andrews, the contingent upside is huge. He's a top 5 tight end, but also that there might be a role for him. Look, and that's how it's playing out. So I am playing him. I don't think we've seen a lot of teams field 2 top 10 tight ends. I want to go back to the Patriots of a number of years ago. But since then, that's not the norm, but it's entirely possible. And so I'm not going to advise people to bench Likely, but I'm still ranking Andrews well ahead of him this week. And I'm probably have Likely down around in the 8 or 9 range.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm like pretty much lockstep with what you're saying here. I mean, you look at their 12 personnel usage. If that maintains and continues, then I think we could see 2, especially the way that like the tight end position performed in week 1, and we already have some injuries to the position. I think we realistically could see 2 top 10, top 12 tight ends from one team, which, like you said, I think maybe was Philly with Goddard and Ertz maybe in there too. But like they're really, I mean, this does not happen frequently at all, right? And so if we're placing our bets, Andrews, the other thing too is Andrews ran the routes that we want tight ends to run, which is in the slot, outside, Likely played the more traditional tight end role in that game. It's just, as you noted, the Chiefs, Steve Spagnuolo, they've done really well against Mark Andrews historically. And, some people could say, well, what if other teams other teams haven't done that in the past after the Chiefs have played Mark Andrews well. So I don't think that we should necessarily expect that. But not only that, but we just saw that Isaiah Likely is not bad, right? Like he can make big plays and do big things. So teams are going to have to keep him honest as well.
Right. It shouldn't be lost on you that, you left with injury, but he came back and on the final play of the game, the biggest play of the game, who was he looking for? Yeah. And at that point, though, I'll also say that Mark Andrews looked as gassed. The only guy on the field who looked as gassed is the Chiefs defensive line, right? Like, so like he may have a little bit of work to do on his conditioning as well, but I think that'll all be fine. And I think over the course of the season, again, I get it. You're out there going, but I lost this week and I need to win this one or I'm going to be 0-2. And this drives a lot of decisions that I think are probably not the best decisions, but it's totally understandable. I'm a little more patient in that way. I'm hoping it doesn't get to 0-4, but even if it does, I think I can climb out of that hole. But I'm looking for ways to avoid getting there too. So totally understand people wanting to force Likely into lineups, but be careful who you're forcing him in over.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing too with Mark Andrews is he had that car accident in that situation in August where like he didn't get a normal camp. Like it wasn't a totally normal offseason for him. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You mentioned that he looked gassed and maybe that played a role, is that his conditioning is just not totally there just yet. So
yep, I totally think so.
Yeah, another thing to think about. But like I said, tight end was a dumpster fire in week 1. We saw a lot of these elite tight ends. Now we're recording this before the Buffalo-Miami game. Dalton Kincaid is playing tonight. So, we won't say whether or not, he does well or not, because we have no idea. But are you nervous about how the tight ends performed in week 1, or do you think that there's going to be a bounce back overall?
I think there'll be a bounce back overall, but I'm hella nervous, right? like we could be having a Noah Gray, Travis Kelce conversation as easily. Right? Not as easily, but we could be having one of those also. So yeah, I think it's a little nerve wracking. I also think like watching the Bills, you mentioned with Dalton Kincaid, man, I don't know how many, and that's one of the great things that I've enjoyed on my series job is we talk to multiple beat writers every week, and you get a really good feel for what's going on the ground and what those writers are seeing. And you come over 30 years, I think most of these people I have been following, and I kind of, part of this game is understanding the preconceived notions that some of these people have, some of the paths they're taking. I think Peter King wrote it once, do writers root for teams? No, we root for our stories, right? So you see that, and you'll see people, reporters who are on the ground, and maybe they'll be looking through those views. So sorting that out a little bit. But Dalton Kincaid, the run has been, consistent. Pretty much every writer I've talked to there thinks he's going to be the most targeted receiving asset here or in Buffalo. And I think he'll probably end up like that, but it might take a little while. It's a totally revamped receiving room, right? Like we're looking at a totally changed situation. And it's funny because I can go back to the draft when I thought Keon Coleman was my big prediction of the draft going to the Bills. And I thought it was a great pick. Yeah. Then talking to people on the ground who kept telling me, yeah, they see him kind of as Gabe Davis. I went, oh, the guy who hasn't caught 50 catches, 50 passes. But now I see that maybe Josh Allen does have an affinity for him, or at least we've seen a brief glimpse of that. So I'm looking to build on that. But I think Dalton Kincaid will be fine. I think a lot of these guys will be fine. If you made me pick one single guy who I have the highest expectation for maybe this week because of the matchup, it's Trey McBride. Mm-hmm. You mentioned something running out of the slot. He runs out of the slot a lot. Yep. The Rams are horrible at stopping that. And I think he played 85% of the snaps, ran almost as many routes as Marvin Harrison Jr., ran them more effectively maybe. Yeah. And Michael Wilson. So I think Trey McBride's in a really good spot this week.
Any concerns about Kelce? Any concerns about maybe like okay. So do you think that there's the possibility that this is finally the year where things slow down and he drops off, or is it more so they might like last year? He obviously had a poor regular season. I say poor, like he was still the tight end 1 in PPR points per game, but like, or at least, like depending on your scoring, he was the tight end 1. But we saw in the playoffs him really pick up, right. Last time we saw him against the Ravens, he dominated the Ravens in the AFC Championship game. Do you think that could kind of happen where we see, it's kind of in reverse of what you expect from an older player, where the second half of the season is where maybe he ramps up and he just becomes the Kelce of old? But do you have concerns? Like, could this be the year that Taylor Swift's boyfriend finally, falls off?
Absolutely. I think it's easy to forget last year he started out with a knee injury that cost him a game and maybe slowed him. Like we can say the same maybe about Tony Pollard. I mean, there's players that maybe weren't hitting the ground running, and maybe Kelce is one of them, but also he is older. And I think it is a concern. It's not an overriding concern. I ranked them as my tight end 1 coming in. Yeah. I think maybe we have not seen this offense where it's going to be. They have new pieces there. We can look at Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target for the 2 seasons without Tyreek Hill, how it's diminished. Last year it was the lowest. Now maybe with Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, when he gets back on the field, it opens things up, and that opens things up more for Travis Kelce. But Rashee Rice is probably going to be a limiting factor working in some of the same areas. So yeah, there's concerns, but I think in general, if if I'm betting, and I guess we kind of are, I'm betting that by the time the season's over, we'll feel pretty good about Travis Kelce. And a lot of these players, like I go back to 2020, right? What was that stretch, the middle of the season when Tom Brady couldn't complete a deep pass? He was horrible, couldn't do it. Yeah. Then all of a sudden at the end of the season, he was the best deep ball thrower in the league. Or the brief periods where Jamar Chase couldn't catch passes. And all of a sudden, yes, he can. Yeah. Right? Like we knew that. We know Travis Kelce's very good. He's cagey. He's a solid veteran in an offense built pretty much around him. I think maybe once we get all the speed pieces in place, and I think that was the whole reason we have a Hollywood Brown there and Xavier Worthy there, is to open things up. I think it'll benefit him.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard at the end of the day to like totally fade the best tight end or arguably the best tight end of all time. Like when it comes down to it.
And we've seen tight ends run, pretty late into their careers. I mean, even like Antonio Gates was beat to hell and was still able a huge goal line presence. And that's another thing, for Kelsey, the last 2 years, has the most opportunities in goal to go situations among all the tight ends. So I think that he's been very effective at it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a plus as well.
Yeah, most definitely. This episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Even though your season-long drafts are over, you can still draft teams over on Underdog. Just head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app and check out their NFL drafts. You can draft a team for a ton of different slates, all in snake draft form. And if you haven't checked out Underdog yet, now's a great time to do it. Because if you sign up with promo code LATEROUND, you'll not only get a first-time deposit offer, but you'll also get my rest of season rankings. After signing up, you'll get an email to your inbox with a link with those rest of season rankings. They're updated each week. So again, that's underdogfantasy.com, promo code LATEROUND. Underdog is the best and easiest place to play fantasy sports. Now back to the show. The other big topic that I want to get to is what I've referred to through the years as ambiguous backfields. We had a lot of these ambiguous backfields in drafts this year where you get multiple middle round running backs that are from the same backfield and you're kind of hoping that one of them, emerges just based on talent, but obviously there's injury upside, all that good stuff. But in week one, it seemed like 2 1As really emerged out of these 2 ambiguous backfields in Cincinnati and Tennessee, where you get Zach Moss, you get Tony Pollard. So my question to you, because I got this question a lot especially with Chase Brown, but I got this question a lot from my mailbag this week. Is it time to panic when it comes to Chase Brown and Tajay Spears?
It's never time to panic after week one.
Yeah.
It's time to start watching more carefully and closely and seeing how it went. I think in Spears' case, the snap shares weren't that far off. I think Spears still had 45%. A little more worrisome in Cincinnati for me, but I don't think we've seen that offense where it's going to be. This might be a symptom of a bigger disease there in terms of the receiving core and maybe timing with the receivers. Yep. I know Dan Orlovsky is not impressed with that. I don't know if you saw, but he thinks they're like a second off. Okay. So that's a little bit of concern. And Zach Moss, obviously, a better kind of power runner than we think Chase Brown will be. I love Chase Brown. I think, you look last year, second fat, like Matt Waldman will somewhere out there shaking his fist at me because he calls speed the cleavage of the NFL and he wants me to keep my eyes up and I don't. It's the old cliche. There's 2 things you can't coach in the NFL level: size and speed. And guys like Chase Brown have at least half of that more than anybody else around them. He was the second fastest speed in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
So I do think, and listening to the people who cover the team on a daily basis over the course of the offseason, I think most of them felt like Chase Brown was going to be the lead piece here, even if we didn't necessarily as fantasy managers all along. So I'm still hoping for some normalization there, but that one concerns me a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree. And then, with the Tennessee thing, you had Brian Callahan come out this week and say that they want to use Tajay Spears more. And he was used in like basically all of their third downs, against Chicago. So negative game scripts could benefit him as well. So I would agree that overall, like of these 2, I'm more concerned about Brown than I am Spears. But when it comes to, and I want to ask you this too, as like a follow-up, when teams perform poorly in week one, like Cincinnati did, is there a part of you, and this is a pure like feel-based take because I have not researched, like I don't know if anyone's really researched this, but is there a part of you that says they got to change things up, right? Like they can't just go with that same approach week in and week out because it clearly didn't work for them. And, in turn, not that Zach Moss had like a horrible game, but does that make you feel maybe a little bit more optimistic than what the box score and what we saw in week one from a usage perspective says with Chase Brown?
2 things. Field-based takes are my approach, right? I mean, that's why I rely on people like you and Barrett and Dwayne McFarland and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But no, but yeah, I like you see a shift and for Tennessee, like anything that takes the ball out of Will Levis's hands is probably a good idea at the moment.
True. Yeah.
But Cincinnati too, I think it was in a unique spot though. And they'll probably be without T. Higgins again last week. But, as I covered the pregame show on Sirius, it struck me that, wow, Jamar Chase showed up an hour before the inactive announcement.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knew if he was going to play or not.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's weird. Right. So I think there's a lot more to work through in Cincinnati, and maybe we see a little more normalization than we might expect, even with Higgins out this week. So maybe we see a little more Brown. But I do think if they're concerned about that, and if Dan Orlovsky's right and the timing of Joe Burrow and his receivers is all off and they need to work on that, then they're going to lean way more heavily on Moss until they get it dialed in.
Yeah, and I know they saw a negative game script, but I want to see them in like a shootout negative game script. You know what I mean? Like,
this week.
Yeah, right, exactly. like what happens if they're down by 3 touchdowns instead of this like ground and pound kind of game? I think things could also change in the way that they need to get that dynamic player in the backfield.
Sure.
So that's why if you have Chase Brown, don't drop him. If we see the exact same split next week, that's just another piece of evidence that we're leaning towards Zach Moss more and more. But a lot of things can change throughout a season with these backfields.
You should be sitting as far away from your panic button as you can at any times when you're setting your lineups. Just like, you got to, I don't want to go Aaron Rodgers and tell everyone to relax, but kind of relax.
Yeah, no, I agree. Probably the biggest story, one of the biggest fantasy stories this past week was J.K. Dobbins. I would argue that if we knew Dobbins was 100% healthy, entering the season, we probably would have been drafting him higher, I want to say. I think that
for sure
the ADP and where he was being drafted was pretty much just driven by health, right? It wasn't driven by talent.
100%.
Like, it's not like Gus Edwards is a very strong strong physically, but it's not like he's like a great running back. And then, Kamani Vidal, we can all have our hopes for him and the potential, but he's a day 3 back at the end of the day.
Special teams player now.
Right, exactly.
Or inactive.
Yeah, right. And so Dobbins comes out, has the day that he has. Do you think that right now the fantasy community is valuing that performance properly? Are you concerned about J.K. Dobbins? Just give me your general feel and vibes and stance on where Dobbins sits right now within fantasy football.
So it's interesting. When Gus Edwards signed, he was called the bell cow by Joe Hortez. He's the GM, and that was before Dobbins got there. And that was before we knew Dobbins' health. And that was also before a procedure at some point this offseason for Gus Edwards. All these things kind of come together. But I think we all know that J.K. Dobbins could be good. The problem was, 9 out of the last 51 games, his availability has been limited to 9 games. So you look at some of the numbers. Tom Pelissero put out a tweet, I think yesterday, just saying, for his career, his 6.1 yards per carry ranks first in the NFL, 4 yards after contact, second in the NFL. All the extra added, the analytic numbers that have more letters in the abbreviation than I know what they mean, all point to great things as well. So I think had we known that, it was rookie year J.K. Dobbins, healthy J.K. Dobbins, we probably would have been a little more eager to draft him. I started getting more shares late in the summer. So, and that was mostly when I was moved out of bestball mode and into redraft mode. So, and I actually started him in a number of games. They said it was going to be a hot hand situations. J.K. Dobbins spontaneously combusted. So the hand is pretty hot. The 2 long runs, 46 and 61 yards are the longest rookie year. I think that's an indication that he's fully healthy. I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field if that's the case. If you've invested in Gus Edwards, park the bus. Park him on the bench for a little while. Don't panic on him either. It's a long season. Things could change. And he still may have value as a goal line play when we get into the buys or whatever. Maybe a guy that can help you avoid getting a 0. But as long as J.K. Dobbins is healthy, and like if you're out there saying, wow, he's out there on my waiver wire, I'm all about being aggressive for players like this, with this profile. I'm injury agnostic is one of the things that has been a long-standing tradition for me. I don't, there's a difference between chronic injuries and chronically injured players. Mm-hmm. He's been chronically injured, but it's been, some of it's just luck, right? For a lot of players. And I know there are people out there, somewhere Michael Fabiano's wagging his finger at me and saying, hurt players stay hurt. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that. So I'm willing to take a chance on a player like Dobbins. If he was available in leagues for me, I probably would have dumped some fab money on him this week, and in the belief that this is going to be a run heavy offense and he's going to be the primary piece.
I think in hindsight, from a process standpoint, and look, I like to do more of this kind of like thinking after the season's over when we can see a larger sample and all that kind of stuff. But I do think, just strictly from a process standpoint, that, because I like you, really changed my tune with Dobbins. And I wrote about it in the draft guide a little bit with the Kamani Vidal dart throw update. But it was more so, okay, I saw Dobbins healthy, therefore I'm going to draft Dobbins, at cost, way over Gus Edwards at cost, because there's just more upside with a guy like Dobbins, who's going to probably run more routes, catch more passes, all that kind of stuff. And we know that as a player, as a talent, Dobbins greater than Gus Edwards. Like at the end of the day, right?
Like by orders of magnitude.
Right, exactly. And so, but I do think from a process standpoint, of course we're saying this after week 1 happened and all that kind of stuff. Sure. But I do wish that I was more aggressive in just going after Dobbins, before early to mid-August when I just saw that he was healthy, because the cost to acquire wasn't significant. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. Now I understand it's a little bit different probably from a best ball perspective, because you don't want to take zeros in your lineup and stuff. And maybe that's what was in the back of my head as to why there wasn't that aggression. But I do think that this is probably a good learning just in general, that yes, this is a really tough injury to come back from. Yes, J.K. Dobbins has not been able to stay healthy. But we probably could be a little bit quicker. And, a lot of people are listening to this saying, well, I was quicker. I was drafting Dobbins in July and blah, 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 blah. And like, that's great. Like that's definitely better process, I think, because at the end of the day, if you're talking a 13th round pick in July for J.K. Dobbins, who has the pedigree that he has and has the upside that he has in a backfield that we knew was wide open. I feel like we probably should have
an offense that they were going to run.
Yes.
First, second, and third. I mean, you can go back over the course of Greg Roman's career, or go back to his portion with Harbaugh in San Francisco. I mean, the rushing numbers have been off the charts. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And I do think it cost. That's the thing. One of the great things about being a merciless cheapskate is you end up with a lot of players like this on your roster,
right?
Because they're just going so late. And when you're sitting there going, okay, well, I see Edwards here 4 rounds earlier, I think I'm going to just wait a little while.
Yeah. I'm glad that I had like a 3-week-ish a period of being aggressive and getting Dobbins, because I now have Dobbins, on my fantasy rosters and stuff. It's just, you want to be, you're greedy as a fantasy analyst. You want to be right from the start instead of being cautious the way that a lot of us were cautious with Dobbins. I think though that, modern medicine is the way that it is now too. And of course I'm not a doctor, and I listen to the smart people who are, I talk to Edwin Porras all the time, who, will give me great takes on these players. And he's still, there's still a lot of hesitation with Dobbins right now, just because that explosiveness could go away after more and more reps and stuff like that. But at the same time, I just don't, I think that the masses kind of already assume that, like they're already taking that into consideration, which is why I don't necessarily think he's a buy or a sell right now. Right.
So I felt like, I was off Nick Chubb. But I thought that 10th round, I don't know when he's coming back. I mean, he has the map to return from this serious injury because he's done it before. But if you listen to the language coming out of Cleveland, it's he'll be back sometime this year, or sometime maybe. It's super vague. And I know there was like a series of really great reports and his personal trainer saying, "Oh, he could play week 1." Right. That was never going to happen, and they're going to be cautious with him all along. You had to know this, and if he's back after 4 games, I think that'll be far earlier than I expect. I expect this to be a slow roll for him. Whereas Dobbins comes in, and I mean, he came into training camp healthier than Edwards, because Edwards had the most recent procedure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think those are things you're looking at, and it's like running backs are a tricky business, but when you have a guy with this kind of upside at that kind of price, I don't think you should hesitate.
Yeah. All right. So I bring folks on perspectives because I want you guys to tell me that I'm wrong about takes that I had throughout the week. That's really what, like, where this all started. And now that we're in season, it's a lot easier to sort of like draw on some of the takes that I had and ask you questions about it. My only sell this week, because it was such an underperforming week in fantasy football, so it was really hard to say, trade this guy away. He overperformed this week. But my only sell in 15 transactions was Stefon Diggs. And I have to add, like, I understand the other side to this argument is that this is the Houston offense. Obviously, they're going to score a lot of points, and obviously Stefon Diggs himself is good. The logic for me, is this combination of he was used in the slot, like this is his role in this offense. He had an incredibly low average depth of target in that role. I don't think he's going to maintain a 1.5 average depth of target like rest of season. That's not the argument, but a lot of people at the end of the day will look at the performance and see that he scored 2 touchdowns and assume that, he had great usage, he had a great game. 19% target share, which I think is probably around what we should probably expect from Diggs. Right. He scores twice. He has this low ADOT. To me, it's a little concerning, and that's why I threw him out there as a sell. It's not just sell him no matter what, of course. But do you think I'm wrong? Or let me ask you this as well. Tank Dell versus Stefon Diggs, which one would you rather have rest of season, as you're answering the question about Stefon Diggs?
So I don't think you're wrong on Diggs. I think anytime someone comes out and has a performance like that with all the underlying metrics suggesting exactly what you're pointing to, and then the huge outcome, the 2 touchdowns, it's very fortuitous. Like I look at Xavier Worthy and his 2 touchdowns, and I see, wow, kind of a trick play, run up the middle, and a broken cover. And Kyle Hamilton was totally lost in the cover too. The safety was gone, right? So I kind of feel like this may be a case with Diggs. I did kind of have a slight change in thinking about this, talking to John McClain, who like a great Houston Texans beat writer for the Chronicle for years, now writes for the team, but a really straight shooter. And so just tried to pin him down on this pecking order. And his final, assessment was Diggs leads the team in catches, Collins leads the team in yards, and Dell leads in yards per catch. If I'm sitting here right now and I'm betting on these, I'm betting on the guys who have been there a year, who have the chemistry and the built-in connection. Diggs has been on his best behavior, according to everyone. And I know that's, kind of a loaded statement, but, he can be troublesome. He's been like all on board with everything. I think the Texans did a really smart thing by, saying, hey, you're here for 1 year and you can go out and make a lot of money with a big season. So I like all that, but he's one of 3. And I think if you can move him and get really great value in return, I'd probably be doing the same.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, look, I'm not making this comp to say that this is the way his production's going to go, but I do have some fear that not to like the extreme degree, people are definitely going to take this the wrong way, which is why I'm prefacing the way that I'm prefacing right now. But I look at a situation like Seattle. Okay. This kind of does remind me in a beefed up, boosted way of Jackson Smith and Jigba, in the way that we saw him get used in week 1, how we saw him get used last year out of the slot. You have 2 really good perimeter players, and it's beefed up in the sense that the situation's a lot better. I think Diggs is obviously a better player at this point than JSN, right? But the idea behind it is pretty similar, that when you have a slot player or a guy who's going to play a lot of his snaps from the slot, who then takes on that role and has kind of a lower-ish A-dot role, because if you look at those 3 wide receivers, I would go to the bank and saying that Stefon Diggs, even from here on out, remove week 1, is going to have the lowest A-dot of those 3 wide receivers on that team.
It's not 1.2 or whatever.
Right. It's like, it's not going to be, like from here to the other side of my desk. It's going to, it'll probably be higher than that. But the way, from just a statistical standpoint, the way that you combat that is with more volume, right? Like you can get away with having a 6 or 7 yard A-dot as long as, like we saw Deontay Johnson at times in Pittsburgh where his A-dot was really low, but he was still relevant in fantasy because they just peppered him with a 29% target share. That's not going to happen in Houston as long as Tank Dell and Nico Collins are healthy, right? That's my fear with Diggs right now.
That was my take all offseason long, is, the days of 160 targets are over for him. And like to a large degree, I mean, what do I want? I want to chase in fantasy. And I think it's important early in the season to combat the volatility. Certain volume, or at least certain anticipated volume, like as sure as anything can be. And I don't see that with Diggs anymore. And even last year when he was getting the volume, it didn't work out well for him the last half of the season. So there were a lot of reasons to dial back on him. I felt like we were drafting them right, like Collins ahead of Diggs, who was ahead of Dell. And I think that's fine. I think Dell's going to end up being very good. I mean, it's easy to forget how good he was late last season when he got hurt. He was on a pretty epic roll there.
He was.
So I would be fine. If I had both of those guys on my roster somehow and I wanted to move one, it would absolutely be Diggs. Not just because he's, the one that's easier to move right now coming off a huge game, but I just think over the long term, the bigger plays are going to come from Dell. And that's kind of what, like none of these guys are going to be my wide receiver 1 or 2. I don't think they're probably going to be wide receiver 3s.
Yeah. The other thing with Diggs, like you mentioned, I think that where they were being drafted made plenty of sense. Like they weren't targets or avoids for me. It was, this makes sense where Diggs is going, makes sense where Dell's going. My stance on the sell this week, just to give a little bit more context, is if you can profit on Diggs right now, I don't think it's a bad idea to profit on that asset, because we didn't see any evidence that he was going to be used in some different way than what we were projecting at the end of the day.
Let's say you went in on you were all hero running back and and Zamir White was your target.
Yeah.
Not saying I did that, but I might have did that. But like, look, no, if you had needed a position, right, and he would be the easy guy to say, yeah, man, here's a guy I can throw over and turn into something better at a position I have a greater need at.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about just some of the offenses that we saw, some of the performances. I mentioned just a second ago that we had an underperformance in general across the league. It was just a low-scoring, really crummy week from a passing perspective. Are there any offenses that underperformed in week 1 that you think could bounce back here in week 2?
Well, I'd like to think it's the Bengals.
Yeah.
I mean, like, honestly, with and maybe some of this will depend on how Jamar Chase's week goes. I still don't know for sure where he's at, right? But even at all that, even with all the trouble and tribulation, he came in and got all 6 of his targets. And at some point, he's going to be a bigger threat. There won't be a T. Higgins this week. But what you said earlier is what strikes me as a game where they need to put up big numbers. And that's entirely possible in Kansas City. So, I like that, and I look at some of the other, underperforming offenses, and I don't think Carolina has a chance of improving in the short term. I mean, this is going to be a long project. I don't even know if David Tepper has the patience for that. If
no,
see changes like 3 weeks in or whatever, but it's a whole different story. I don't know that we're going to see a huge step forward from the Titans. I mean, everything the Titans, their improvement is based on Will Levis not being what he was last week.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can do that. I don't know if Brian Callahan knows if he can do that right now either. So that'll be a big decision. I think the Jets are probably a candidate playing against Tennessee, knocked a little rust off. I'm a little concerned at Aaron Rodgers not being as mobile as he's been in the past. And we did see the Tennessee pass rush. It's not like monstrous, but they hectored Caleb Williams a little bit, but he's a rookie. It might be a little harder to do that with Aaron Rodgers. So I think the Jets are a candidate. Get Mike Williams running a little better this week and maybe being a little more involved. Allen Lazard was surprisingly good. And I think the other pieces there, Breece Hall is fantastic. So I think that might be the offense that I'm looking for. It was a tough matchup for him.
Yeah, it definitely was. The Titans are one. I remember I did an episode on early season schedule analysis, right? And one of the teams that I called out was Tennessee because I was invested, and I am invested in the Tennessee offense in best ball just because I thought that the costs were pretty attractive where a lot of them were going, right? But one of the things that did scare me from a managed league perspective, not to say that it totally scared me off, but their early season schedule was rough, right? Like Chicago's defense, now they might get destroyed this weekend because Houston's Houston, but Chicago's defense has been very, very good since the middle of last year. When we saw it week 1 with the turnovers, obviously against Tennessee and their ability to get to Will Levis and such. And then Levis, he's going to make these boneheaded. He's like a Jameis Winston type quarterback back there where, you'll get some really amazing down the field throws, but then you also get those boneheaded moves as well.
Right.
And then week 2, they get the Jets. And so I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot of people panicking greatly with the pass catchers, specifically like Calvin Ridley after this week. I think there's a very real possibility we see that.
Yeah, we totally see that. I mean, I've already started that with DeAndre Hopkins, just not not
playing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, like, a guy that's coming in and acknowledging that he's playing hurt. But I also expected a little more from Calvin Ridley his first game.
Right.
I think he went in like at about, the consensus ranking was probably about 38 or 39 or whatever. He ended up 52.
Yeah.
Or in that range. And so, yeah, that's not encouraging. I think the backfield is the place to invest there right now. And that's why I'm not giving up on Spears. I think they're going to lean heavily into that. But I don't know that this is the week for them to improve. As you mentioned, tough early schedule. So at least they might avoid Hassan Reddick. That'd be nice.
That would be nice. That would be very nice. All right. So there's some more backfields that I want to do kind of like a rapid fire with you where we have these backup running backs. And look, this is becoming more and more frequent in today's NFL where you have these backup running backs that are kind of, flex worthy in some leagues. You might be able to get some fantasy production from them, but they're not the 1A. They're not the starting running back in their offense. And so, we're not necessarily valuing them, immensely high. But my rapid fire question that I want to ask you, I'm going to name some of these guys. I'm going to name these backups. And I'm going to have you let me know. You can answer quickly or longly, if you will. If these guys, if you think that the starter for the team is then in danger, okay? So we'll start with Tampa Bay. You have Bucky Irving as the backup. You have Rachaad White as the starter. Is Rachaad White in danger of losing a lot of work this year?
The short answer is yes. I go back to the course of the offseason and listening to the words of my old high school rival, the Saguaro Cougar quarterback, Skip Pete, now the running backs coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And like he's been like an open book during his time as a coach. We heard him in Dallas. He was the one saying, hey, we like Tony Pollard when he gets 30 snaps, right? I mean, he's always been an open book. I felt like the message he was sending, that Bucky Irvin was there as a message to Rachaad White to hit the damn hole.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so early on, indications are White is not hitting the hole.
Yeah.
Right. He's just an inefficient runner. He's great in the passing game and he's serviceable as a runner, but he's not a great runner. And Bucky Irvin might be the answer here. So I think if he doesn't become more effective running between the tackles, I think we'll see more and more Bucky Irvin.
Yeah. Week 1, Rachaad White still had his, 65% route participation, which is what we'll probably see from Rachaad White. I mean, like as a prospect, like I'm a sucker for pass catchers. As a prospect, loved Rachaad White because he had an unbelievable pass catching profile coming out. One of the best that my model has really seen over the last 10 years or so. And then, we've seen him do that in the NFL. We even saw it in week 1, right? Like he was catching plenty of passes out of the backfield. It's weird though, because Bucky Irving to me profiled more as that kind of player coming out, as more of like a change of pace, relatively reliable hands and backfield pass catcher. And that's always been my fear with Irving. But I do think that, we have to always put our brains in the coach's brains and think, or at least that's probably not the right way to phrase that. But we have to always think about the way the coaches are thinking. And the way the coaches are thinking, like you said, they want to use Bucky Irving probably more than a lot of people would want to, at least Rachaad White managers would want to realize.
Right. The good news is targets are worth more than carries.
Exactly. Right.
So, we've got that going for us. But I think that, and like Rachaad White even talked about it last year. I mean, his finish last year was based so much on volume, right? He had the second, third most. He was right there with McCaffrey and carries, tied with 272, and had a lot of catches. And even he said, like, hey, I'm going to be great in yards from scrimmage because I'm a great asset in the receiving game, and he'll continue to be that. But I expect to see more Irving as a runner soon.
Similar situation with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. I say similar, not that Travis Etienne's as good as Rachaad White Rachaad White's as good as Travis Etienne on the ground, but similar from the perspective that Etienne still got a lot of run as a receiver. Bigsby did not, but Bigsby did dig into this workload. And so
the early downs.
Yeah.
Too.
Like, do you think that Etienne managers right now should be nervous?
They should be nervous. Yes and no. They should be glad that they didn't pay the premium for last year's running back 3 finish, because they didn't, right? Yeah. He was reasonably priced in drafts because I think that, I pay a lot of attention to desired outcomes, or what I think are desired outcomes of the teams.
Yeah.
The team wanted this last year. They wanted a split last year.
Yeah.
They thought Tank Bigsby was going to be that guy. If, working with Mike Dempsey, my co-host on Sirius, he covers that team on a daily basis there in Jacksonville. And I mean, it was clear that they expected Tank Bigsby to take some of the pressure off. Well, I mean, it was like the year before was like a 70%, share, 70% of the running back touches for ETN. And then last year it went up, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's not what they wanted. And it was because Bigsby didn't secure the ball and fell short of expectations. This year he secured the ball. The guy who dropped it, he didn't drop it. Like somewhere out there, Peanut Tillman is like feeling like a swell of pride at the punch that he saw. What a delightful punch that was. But I do think we're going to see more Bigsby, and I think that's been the desired outcome for 2 years now, and it's just coming to fruition. I don't think it takes ETN out of the tail end of the running back 1, high running back 2 range, but it probably keeps him limited there. I don't think we'll see that high end production we saw last year.
Yeah, I think it's more of a nuisance to ETN than necessarily him taking over. I'd say the one backfield this week that might have flipped, that probably changed the most just from an ADP perspective, is the one in Vegas, where Zamir White was drafted as a low-end RB2. And week 1, we saw, I mean, just from a usage standpoint, I've been saying this on the podcast all week. If we had this exact same usage week in and week out, we would straight up prefer Alexander Mattison over Zamir 100%. White for the rest of the season. So, who knows what'll happen, but where are you at with that situation? And should Zamir White / Zamir White managers be nervous right now?
Yes, we should be incredibly nervous, and we are. I feel like I can speak for all of us. Look, we saw the late season run, right? And so, just talking to people there in the building, right? Like, you get some information, and I think it's good information. Like, Josh Jacobs could have returned the last 2 games last year, but they thought White gave them more juice in the backfield.
Yeah.
Antonio Pierce, as a coach, is more like a player, like he was as a player. He's like that old school. That's why, Gardner Minshew wasn't announced as the starter upon arrival. He's got to beat out the incumbent. That's why the locker room loved him, and he had that groundswell of approval from the team to stick around and go from interim to coach. And so I talked to people who cover that team on a daily basis, multiple people who said he loves Antonio Pierce, loves Zamir White. I bought into that narrative, and he got that same like 80% usage that is ideal. Clearly, that isn't how it started. And this is one of those cases where you've told yourself a happy story. You better be ready to accept the fact that your happy story is going to have an unhappy ending if you stick with it. So I'm dialed back. I'm not giving up. Things can change over time. And we've seen Alexander Mattison come up short. But, if you thought he was just like, oh, he's just going to be on the receiving downs, well, that touchdown catch was a 1st and 10 play.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's more than we expected. And maybe it changes game to game. Maybe they need a game where they get up and they're ahead. I'm not quick to forget, the game against the Chiefs last year, 145 yards for Zamir White. He's like a very powerful runner. He offered a little bit as a receiver when he catch 9 passes. I'm like, I'm wish casting here. But yeah, for right now, totally be in not panic mode, but totally accept what you're seeing. And acknowledge that it's going on and make adjustments accordingly. Zamir White is going to go from being in a lot of my lineups to not being in a lot of my lineups. And again, you probably got him at a price where you can afford to do that.
Right.
Sit on him just like with Gus Edwards and hold out and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't help that they're playing Baltimore this week.
It does not.
Does not. Baltimore coming off a loss, no less. But yeah, I think that with White, if you want to look at it positively, like he still saw a decent backfield share in terms of rush attempts. The problem, obviously, was that he saw a 6% target share. Alexander Mattison
had a fumble.
Alexander Mattison 19%. Routes run percentage, you get Alexander Mattison at 60, Zamir White at 25. It's that pass catching role that is going to be a little bit scary for White right now. And like I said, again, this is a situation that you got to react to, understand that where the value really is. From a fantasy football perspective, where I think a lot of people still think that rush attempts, as you noted, are just as valuable as targets are. They're not, which is why we're still going to value Rachaad White over Bucky Irving, and we're still going to value Travis Etienne over Tank Bigsby. The difference here is that the backup is the one, or the quote unquote backup is the one who is seeing that work. And that's the work that not only got Alexander Mattison a lot of fantasy points in week 1, but it's the work that is more valuable, especially on a team that's not projected to be very good. That's
right. That's the other part of this, right? I mean, they need to be playing from ahead, and how often will that happen? I do think the desired outcome is to play defense and run the football.
Yes.
Right. Their quarterback position reflects that, but also they're not always going to be able to do that. And we saw what can happen. And it's not what I was hoping.
Nothing screams that you just want to run the football and play in low scoring games, like punting the ball in plus territory from on 4th and 1 when you need a first down to come back and win this game late in the 4th quarter. So I mean, I think that it seems like Zamir White is like the hypothetical perfect match for a guy like Pierce. It's just that will this environment allow for this to actually come to fruition?
That is exactly, you have nailed it, sir.
Yeah. The last one is the one in Minnesota. You got Ty Chandler with Aaron Jones. Any feel with that, or do you think it's more so, Jones is probably a 66% guy, Ty Chandler 33% guy, and they both can kind of play a similar role in the offense?
I think that's kind of what Aaron Jones has been, and I think he'll continue to be that as long as he's healthy. He's got huge upside. We can see the playmaking ability there, and we've seen little flashes of it with Ty Chandler. So I think that's about right. It's Aaron Jones is the lead piece there as long as he's in the locked and upright position, and Ty Chandler with a ton of contingent upside if something happens.
Yeah. All right, one more thing I want to get to. Well, two more things technically, but the one thing is this Rams wide receiver group. Like you said, you talked to plenty of beats and folks that are covering these teams. Have you learned anything about how they might deploy these wide receivers, or have you seen/researched anything to show which direction you would lean with these wide receivers without Puka Nacua?
First of all, I don't celebrate anybody's injuries. I do, as a heavy investor in Demarcus Robinson, find it fortuitous.
There you go. Right.
But it was, the investment in Robinson came because of the late season run last year. He was involved in part of that offense, and clearly someone that Matthew Stafford has an affinity for. And I think kind of what we saw last week, maybe how it plays out, except I think we're way undervaluing Tyler Johnson in this offense. I think, maybe we'll see, maybe he'll be the guy that we'll wish we had, at least while Nacua is out.
Yeah.
So I do think Tyler Johnson's in a really good spot, but again, Demarcus Robinson having the chemistry built in with Stafford works in his favor as well. But Cooper Kupp's going to be dominant.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, he's my wide receiver 1 this week already. It's just I don't know. Yeah. I can't put anyone else above Cooper Kupp. I mean, someone listening to this is going to watch the Tyreek Hill tonight. Maybe he goes nuts. And I'm going to look like an idiot after the fact, but man, Cooper Kupp could see like a 35-40% target share without Puka Nacua in that lineup. The one thing too, I saw this, the Coach Speak Index tweeted this out. I don't know if you've heard anything differently or if you think there's anything to this, but there was evidently a quote from Sean McVay where when talking about the wide receivers, he said, we have Cooper Kupp, we have Demarcus Robinson. And then he kind of said, we have these 3 other guys in Tyler Johnson, Jordan Whittington, and Tutu Atwell that can kind of step in and play that other role. And, Tyler Johnson played the Nacua role in 11 personnel. He played well against Detroit. I've always been a Tyler Johnson truther too, I loved him as a prospect, thought he was really undervalued. Just as a player, clearly that didn't really come to fruition. But do you think that it just feels like Demarcus Robinson is just the safer bet, whereas we're recognizing that they run a lot of 11 personnel. And if Tyler Johnson's that guy who would be out there in 3 wide sets, and he could be just as valuable as Demarcus Robinson if it goes that direction.
I don't have the number in front of me, but the Rams have to be up there with who? Cincinnati and
their 11 personnel usage.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's what I think. Like most likely, everyone's going to be chasing Demarcus Robinson. So if you miss out on that, I'm going to be chasing Tyler Johnson, and for the reason you said, he looks like the direct replacement for Nacua in those 3 receiver sets.
Yeah. All right. One more question, Bob. If you look into your crystal ball, which player will be the face of week 2 waiver wire columns after this is all said and done?
So in leagues where you're not playing with a bunch of proactive people, because if you are, it might have already happened. Michael Penix Jr. is a guy that, and I get it. Quarterbacks are not often highly sought after commodities, but if you're making speculative plays, I think the angst over Kirk Cousins, who clearly is not where he needs to be yet in his recovery from the torn Achilles, and that he's not there yet suggests things to me. And the presence of Michael Penix suggests other things to me. The usage in the preseason adds all the intrigue to that. So totally a speculative play. I think if we're looking at some guys that, like, I was trying to think of running backs that might fit the bill, and I don't know if we're going to see that.
Without injury. Yeah.
Without injury, right? It's going to take an injury. So if we're looking for other pieces, I think Adonai Mitchell is a guy. Yeah. I mean, we're not for, 2 little overthrows.
Yes.
So we would be talking way more about him than we're talking about Alec Pierce this week. And I think, this might be the time to land Tucker Kraft before Jordan Love comes back, because the usage was off the charts weird. And if you invested in Luke Musgrave, you should be a little concerned there. Especially with Kraft. I mean, he's the guy coming off injury.
Very, very. Look, as someone who is fine with drafting Luke Musgrave this year, I am very, very concerned about Luke Musgrave. I actually dropped him in some leagues. It's just not worth it. It is
funny because I talked to people over the course of the offseason who kept telling me, no, don't dial in on Musgrave. But their contention was not what we saw week 1. They thought it would be a way more even split, but it was nowhere near even. I think if Jordan Love comes back sooner than we think, and it looks like he's heading back sooner than we think, or at least on track to, I think Tucker Kraft's going to be a great guy. But if you just nail me down to one, it's 100% Mitchell, because I think people way underestimate Anthony Richardson's ability to throw the football. And I know I watched the end of that game and I saw how everyone was on the sidelines looking all disappointed. You know who was not disappointed? Shane Steichen. He sees the direction this is taking with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I also said week 2 waiver wire technically be the week 3
waiver
wire columns, for the record.
Yes.
Bob, this was long overdue. Thank you so much for all of your time. As usual, I love our conversations. I love chatting with you. Let everyone know where they can find you before we head out.
Footballguys.com is the website. You can check out the daily update podcast every morning. Comes out at 5:30. Just 10 minutes of news and tidbits and just stuff to get you off to a good start. My fantasy notebook's out every Thursday. My in and out column is out every Saturday. And be careful with that one. I'm taking some big swings and I'm sorting through the ashes of last week now. And also you can hear me on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight. Saturday night, we're on the NFL channel and the fantasy channel from 8 to 11. Sunday, you can hear me on the pregame show with Jeff Mans from 11 to 1. It's almost like they want you to hear me. And if you're trying to miss, it's going to be difficult. I apologize for that.
You're everywhere, man. You're still everywhere. It's awesome. As always, you guys can find me on Twitter at LateRoundQB. All my stuff over on LateRound.com. Make sure you're taking advantage of the new underdog offer, where if you sign up with promo code LateRound, you will get a link to my rest of season rankings that I update every single Tuesday. Otherwise, everyone, thanks for tuning in.